is a friend of mine. His name is Michael Mays. He's an independent Bigfoot researcher. For many years, he was with the Texas organization and that did some amazing things in Oklahoma at a place called Area X. And he's written this book about the Valley of the Apes, about their experiences there. And he has a book on big cats, black, large cats seen in this part of the United States. He also has a book called Patty. It's a children's book that I was able to do the illustrations for, watercolor illustrations. So if you want to get one of those, you can get the artist to sign it and the writer to sign it at the same time. And then you could retire on it someday, I'm sure. But I'm really glad that Mike is here. He is a very serious researcher. He's very dedicated, and I'm glad to call him my friend. Mike.
Thank y'all for being here. It's humbling to think anybody would come out to listen to me. And the talking, I'm a middle school teacher, so I'm used to it. My name is Michael Mays, longtime member of the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. Done a lot of work in Texas and in Oklahoma. And Robert asked me to come talk about the book I wrote that came out about a year and a half ago now, about my 2 decades of doing this and what this book was about. And some of it has taken place very close to where we are now, 8 to 10 miles on the other side of the Arkansas-Oklahoma border. Okay, who am I? Who's this joker standing in front of you? I was born in East Texas, got a Bachelor of Science from the University of Mary Hardin Baylor. It's a little Baptist school in Central Texas. Played basketball there. That's how I got through school. I've been married for 31 years, been a school teacher for 31 years. Coached every sport except soccer. Just can't do it. I just can't. Have a lifelong interest in this and other mysteries of the natural world. I'm not big on detective stories and things like that, but mysteries of the natural world have always grabbed my attention. I was the kid who checked out all the monster books at the library in elementary school. It was so bad, my librarian actually, she would only let me check out the monster books every other trip. She said she wanted me to be a more well-rounded young man. So since I was a little kid, I've had an interest. I was a member of the North American Wood Ape Conservancy from 2005 to 2023, served on the board of directors for more than a decade there, and served as the chairman of the board of the organization for 3 years. I've authored, as Robert said, three books. One is called The Latest Valley of the Apes, which we'll talk about today, but I also have one called Shadow Cats, the Black Panthers of North America, which is about the whole black cat phenomenon.
Okay, people who will laugh at you when they say that you've seen a Sasquatch will fight you when you tell them there's no such thing as a Black Panther, so that's what that book is. Then the children's book, as Robert mentioned also, he did the beautiful illustrations. I told him I wanted illustrations that were reminiscent of that book we had when we were kids, where the wild things are. Remember how colorful that was and beautiful? And that's what he's done. So that's what that book is too. But we're here to talk about the Valley of the Apes book. So here we go. Why did I write it? Because I thought everything we had done and I experienced was interesting, and I thought there would be an audience for it, someone that would like to read about it. NWAC, we always stay kind of under the radar. Every now and then we come up to the surface, but for the most part, pretty close as far as what we were doing. I thought it was time
To get some of this stuff out. Awesome. Get this stuff out where people could see it and know about what we've done. I think we did a lot of good work during my time there. Also, And DW mentioned the TV shows. I wanted people to know, what is it really like to go after and search for these animals? If you've ever wondered while watching a TV show that they're in this hot spot and all this great stuff's happening, why do they leave? If they're really trying to find why do they leave if they're convinced one's there? So this is what it's really like. It's often I've described it as 99% boredom, 1% terror. That's kind of what happens most of the time. So, what's it about? It's partially autobiographical, my experiences, but also the experiences of my fellow members. And there's some really cool stuff that we've achieved and experienced out in this place we call Area X. Okay, how did I get into it? That is usually the first question. As I told you, as a child, I had a great interest in these kinds of things, and in May of 2005, this is the actual sighting location, was out 3 a.m. looking for them, me and a buddy. And this is a Forest Service road in the Sam Houston National Forest in southeast Texas. Don't know how well you can make it out, but right about here there's a little rise and then it dips. We were in a small vehicle. My buddy and I would take turns driving. I had the truck. He had a Mazda Protege. I don't know if y'all remember those. Not very smart to be out in this kind of place in a Mazda Protege, but there you go. It is what it is. That's the most embarrassing part of the whole story, actually. Well, actually, no, this is the most embarrassing part. I had spent $100 at Academy on a Gen 1 night vision binocular. Biggest piece of garbage I've ever, it was awful. And I was determined to get some use out of it. So we were running these Forest Service roads late at night, and I was looking out the side window when he brings the car to a sudden stop. And we're on a slight we've come over that incline, now we're just slightly pointed down on the other side. It's pretty flat down there. And I swing around to look at him. I said, what? And he's just pointing. And he says, what is that? And I turned to look, and standing about 30 yards out in front of us, and I'm a football coach for 30 years, so I've had plenty of third and 30s. I know what it looks like. There's something standing in the road. And if y'all were in the vehicle looking down the road, like in our position, it was standing kind of like this, kind of 3/4, just standing there. And we were on like I said, an incline kind of pointed downward, and it was, those cars, they were only this high off the ground. So the headlights had it illuminated from about the waist down pretty well, and it was a deep reddish brown. It's kind of the color of melted chocolate. If you've ever seen those commercials where they're pouring the chocolate, it's kind of that color. Or long dead pine needles. Not the bright red, orange, orangutan kind of color when they're freshly dead. We're talking about long dead pine needles. And it's just standing there. And as we watch, it takes a side step like this, and then swings his arm across and steps. Takes one more step across a bar ditch, and it's into the woods and it's gone. And that was my first experience with it. This was about 3:15 a.m. The rest of the night we spent driving the area, hoping to see it again, figuring we wouldn't, but looking for any sign of any human activity. Is there a truck parked somewhere? Is there a hunter's camp somewhere? Is there an ATV? Is there anything that might indicate there are other people here? We never did find anything. And so that was my first encounter. It's really unspectacular. It's just an animal in the road. It's just what the animal was that's kind of unique and special. Now, later that year in August, I took this picture. This was about 3/4 of a mile from the sighting location. I was actually down there with my brother, and we had heard some hogs rooting down low in the bottom, so we went to go see if we could take a look at them. And we're standing there, sweat just dripping off. It's 100% humidity and 90 plus degrees, and we're taking a break, and I had a 35 millimeter film camera, not digital, but film. And as I'm standing talking to him, I see some movement over his shoulder, and all I did was just raise the camera and snap. I didn't look through a viewfinder or anything. I just raised the camera up and snapped, and then looked. By the time I actually looked with my own eyes, I didn't see anything, but you could hear something moving away, kind of at a 45-degree angle away from us. And remember the days when you took your film to Walgreens or Walmart? Remember those days? So I didn't even know if I'd caught anything for 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, that's the photograph that came back. It's not much detail. You say, well, I've never seen that before. It's because we really didn't promote it. It's just another maybe to anybody who didn't take it. But it's upright, a little closer view of it. And again, quartering away from us. I think you can kind of see to me, I kind of see a left elbow as it's walking and kind of a big old round bottom as it's walking away. But it's upright, it's big, and you revisit that spot. There's nothing like that there. And so I can't tell you for sure what it was, but that's not anything that's supposed to live in those woods. There's not even supposed to be any bears in those woods down in southeast Texas. That's the shot we used as the cover of the book. Now, in early years, we were kind of weekend warriors like everybody else. It says here, read an excerpt. I'm not going to do that. I'll just tell you what happened. We had several really intense encounters in an area called the Big Thicket National Preserve. I don't know, has anybody heard of that? You all familiar with it? It's just northeast of Beaumont. It's pretty wild and woolly country, and it's protected. It's not all contiguous. It's about 7 or 8 different units, maybe more than that now, that are protected. And this particular unit we were in was called the Lance Rozier Unit. And it's 25,000 acres of just true wilderness. There's no trails. The only thing that cut through there are these pipeline right-of-ways, these senderos that have to be cleared because of the pipelines that run underneath them. Other than that, it's completely wild. And we had some pretty crazy stuff happen down there. We had 2 members who were in a tent asleep. One was in a cot, one was in a bag on the floor. And it's kind of funny to talk about now. The one on the floor woke up, on the ground woke up, because the other one was on top of him. Something had given him the forearm shiver through the tent and knocked him out of his cot. And they woke up and there was this big screaming match back and forth. It was really an intense encounter. They never could see anything. If you ever try to shine a light through the mesh of your tent, you're wasting your time. You can't see anything. But this thing stayed and howled and screamed and growled, and it was a really intense experience for them. This was the same spot years ago. We did a program called Weird Travels on the Travel Channel. I don't know if y'all remember that. And this was taking place in the same spot. So that story is in the book. Thicket Probe 2, again, similar story. I was present for this one. We'd had a quiet night. We'd been call blasting. Does everybody know what that is? Do y'all know what call blasting is? Okay, some of you are fibbing, so I'm going to tell you. It's where you broadcast, you can broadcast anything really loudly to try to get some reaction from wildlife. So we had taken some alleged Bigfoot recordings, and we were broadcasting those, blasting those out into the woods. And many times, not all the time, but you'll get some responses back. It's really cool to play something and then to hear that exact call come back to you, a few minutes later. But we've been doing that without success, and we were stretched out along one of these pipeline right-of-ways at about quarter-mile intervals. And we were actually packing up, getting ready to go. All the teams had come together at the, what we called it the trailhead. It wasn't really a trail, but where we had dove into the woods. And we were told that the guys back at the truck who were playing the sounds said, we heard something and it sounds like it's between you guys and us. We're coming that way, spread out. And so we formed a picket line along the pipeline right away. And we had a fireman from Louisiana and a DPS trooper in the group at that time. They were together. They were right at the trailhead, and we had kind of dropped our gear and we were spread out along this pipeline at intervals. And these guys see something kind of right there by where we had dropped all the backpacks and rucksacks and stuff. And next thing you know, this thing just sprints, leaps across the pipeline right away into the woods on the other side, right in front of them. They said it was so big it blocked out the sky, you know, as it came across. And it freaked them out really bad. One was a fireman. He's trained to run into burning buildings. The other was a guy that was working in the narcotics division of the Texas Department of Public Safety. Big old guy. He's kind of got it kicks in the door of crack houses. It scared him so bad he ended up quitting the organization not long after and never went back. So that story's in there. This is a story. We had some Baylor professors that called us, wanted to take us out. They were writing a book. And we took them to an area in the Sam Houston National Forest. Along this creek, we found some tracks. It was maybe the coldest night I've ever spent in the woods. I think it got down to 14 degrees that night. And photos of tracks photos never do them justice, but we found these two tracks right on the edge of the water. And right next to, you can't see it in this photo, but there was some knuckle prints right next to it, as if someone squatted down and had this hand down. You could almost imagine it was dipping water out of the creek, maybe to drink or something. But we found those. That story, story about our guys who did a Monster Quest episode, that's part of the early days. And then this is a creek also in the Sam Houston National Forest. This is found the best print I've ever found. And you can see it there. It's a little distorted when I put it on the slide, but it measured about 14 inches long. You can see the big toe, just how big that is. We found it was part of a trackway we followed for about a quarter of a mile, wound down this creek. We came across 2 copperheads and 3 water moccasins in a quarter of a mile, and somebody's walking down there barefoot. It kind of defies explanation why somebody would do that. There was also a second set of tracks, considerably smaller, that were with it. So in our mind, we're kind of picturing maybe a mother and a juvenile together, both sets of tracks barefoot. And we would find the tracks whenever the creek took a bend, wherever like the silt and sediment would get washed up against the bank, that's where you would find the tracks. And like I said, we followed it for over a quarter of a mile until they petered out. I don't know if they hopped out of the creek bed at that time or not. But the walls of the creek bed were 8 feet high. You know, you were down in it, go back, you can get an idea looking here. You're in the channel itself. You can see how high the forest floor is from that point. It would be a great travel route when it's dry for something to move around without being seen from the actual level of the forest floor. So that's the cleanest track I've ever found, and you see it's just in sandy creek bed. You don't find much land like that around here. Now, Area X, have y'all heard of this place? Anybody? Okay. It's in the Ouachita Mountains. You wanna know where it is? That's where it is. Now, we joke, y'all probably all seen this picture of the United States at night, and you see where the cities are and the lights. You want to know where these animals are? Find the black spots. That's where they are. And as you can see, there's a distinct absence of light that shows in the satellite imagery here. And that's Area X. It's mostly southeast Oklahoma, but it does trail over into southwest Arkansas as well. We did most of our work 8 to 10 miles on the other side of the Arkansas-Oklahoma border. So that's the general area where we work. We got in there, our leader at the time, the chairman of the organization, was a guy named Alton Higgins.
Zero. He is one of the smartest people I've ever known. He was part of the BFRO at the time. Involved with another guy named David Wilbanks, who's written a Bigfoot book himself from Oklahoma. And they've got some reports in the area, and so they went to go check it out. And as they were going around asking people about their experiences and stuff, they met a retired Forest Service worker.
Got it? Okay. Well, show me. Okay. Try to remember that. Thank you.
Sorry, folks.
Anyway, they met a retired Forest Service worker who claimed to have had activity on his land, and he said that they went to his house. He had a working sawmill there, and he said he would hear these things screaming from the woods whenever he milled boards, whenever that saw, that screeching sound saws make. It's almost as if they were trying to mimic that sound and call back to him. So Alton asked him, he says, if you were me, where would you go? And they had a map out, and the man pointed to a spot on the map. He said, I'd go right there. He says, I can't get you there. I don't know the roads to get there. He said, that's where I would go. And that's the area that became Area X. Now, why Area X? It sounds all spooky and X-File-ish and stuff like that. We had 3 working study areas at the time. We called them areas X, Y, and Z. They just as easily could have been area A, B, and C, but we did X, Y, and Z. One of them turned out to be kind of a bust. The other activity kind of petered out, and then Area X was left. And so it's kind of a cool sounding name, but not a very cool story about how it got that name. Okay, so we had the first thing we did, we started a camera trapping project. This ran from 2006 to 11. It's called Operation Forest Vigil. That's me fiddling with one of the cameras there. We would go in, the idea was to go in, put the cameras up, and then after that come in, change batteries, change cards, and get in and out as fast as possible to try to make as normal an environment as we could without us there. We wanted the wildlife to kind of go about its usual business. We would usually, because it was so remote and hard to get to, and most of us from a long way off, we'd have to spend a night at one of the family's hunting cabins on the property. And it was during those times we had all kinds of activity. We'd had things come up and slap the side of the cabin, rocks come flying in from the woods, landing on the metal roofs, heard all manner of vocalizations and things like that. So it was from this that, and this is just kind of a list of the experiences we had. Alton found just a pristine trackway in an area called the Mud Hole. It's an area, I think it's got a little spring or something that bubbles up because it always has a little water in it. It's always real soft. It's one of the few areas that hold tracks there. We had returns on call blasts. We found rocks on roofs, and as Alton says, rocks don't fall from trees. If you find a rock on your roof, it was thrown up there. Now you can debate who or what threw it, but rocks don't fall off trees, they don't jump, they don't fly. Something threw it up there. And where we were, the people always says, well, could other people have done it? You only have my word to take on it, but it's extremely remote. There were no other people around. We would go in there and spend a whole summer and not see another person outside of our organization come in. It was, or a family member. Just the idea that it was other people. The nearest paved road, blacktop road was 7 miles away. And yet it took 2 hours to get there because you had to wind around on switchbacks and stuff. To get back out of the valley where we were. So the Ouachita Project was born. One of our guys had an idea. Weekend warrior approach. It always seemed like things would start to happen the last night we were there. If we were there for 2 nights or 3 nights, it was always the last night we'd get some kind of activity. And we came up with this theory that these things have been around us for a long time. They know we're bad news, so when we come in the area, they probably just hunker down, and there's no need for them to reveal themselves. They know we're going to be in, we're going to be out in a night or two, we're going to go. But when you stay a little longer than that third night, that fourth night, for lack of a better term, I think we start to get on their nerves. And so that's when they try to invite you to leave through various behaviors. They shake branches and vegetation. They throw rocks and pine cones. They growl. Sometimes they roar. And 99.999% of the people in the world, they accept that invitation to leave at that time, right? They don't need this, they're gone. So we came up with this idea, what happens if we just refuse to leave? Would they get so annoyed, so put out with us, that they would kind of ratchet up the behavior and expose themselves, show themselves to us? Or would they just move on somewhere else? That's what we wanted to find out. And so we started running teams in there for a week at a time. Instead of having a big outing for 4 nights with 20 people, we said, well, what if we had 10 teams of 2 who each stayed a week? Now you've got this continuous presence of people. What would they do? That was kind of the idea behind it. So we've been running summer operations in this area ever since. Okay? Okay, so what that resulted in, track finds, lots of audio recordings, of which I'm going to show you some here, so I'll play you some in a moment. Multiple visuals, blood and hair evidence, and then some, we'll talk about tag 7 in a minute. Okay, let's see if I'm smart enough to do this. So this was an audio that was taken in 2012. We're inside a cabin. I don't know how well this will come across. On the NAWAC website, they have an audio library that you can go and listen to these. If you have headphones on, it's better. But there's some real subtle grunts, huffs. Y'all all heard the ape-like kind of a thing on TV, probably from an ape. But you can hear that, and then you hear a rock hit the cabin. DW, I'm not smart enough to do this. Where are you? Now that'll wake you up. And again, you go out the next morning and you find the rock on top of the roof. And one thing we got in the habit of doing whenever we would get in the valley is we would sweep the roof of debris so that anything that was on it the next morning or sometime later in the week had to have been deposited there at that time. Okay. Now, this next one is a roar that was recorded. Now you imagine yourself, you're 7 miles from the nearest paved road, and you hear this about 50 yards from your camp. They started calling this the T-Rex roar because it was, they said they could feel it in their chest. It rattled their fillings. I don't know. It loses a little something here, but you imagine that out in the dark, 1 in the morning, middle of nowhere. Now this next one is my favorite. It's a combination. You hear a whistle, you'll hear something grunt, and then you hear a very loud rock strike on the cabin. So hopefully you can pick it all up. Ooh. play this again for you. Explain what's going on in this second part. These are the actual sounds, the huff, they're kind of amplified, cleaned up a little bit. I'm going to play it again. I want you to hear that whistle again. He wanted us to go home. So listen to that single tone whistle. And we sent this into Cornell, which is kind of the holy land of bird calls and stuff, and they said it wasn't a bird. They couldn't tell us what it was, but they could tell us it was not a bird. So I'm going to play it again one more time. You'll hear the whistle, and then you'll hear the which to me that's the creepiest part, and then the rock comes. Listen to the Now I don't know what that was, but contextually with a lot of the other things going on, we believe it was one of these animals. Guys, bears can't throw rocks, right? You know, what's out there that can throw rocks? And the answer is, unless it's other people, there's nothing out there, according to science, that can do those things. We've got nothing out there that should be whistling. We got nothing out there that should be making ape noises. And yet, there it is. Now, one of the big successes I feel like we had during my time in the NAWAC was Tag 7. What we did is we took, how many of you guys remember the old program, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom? Y'all remember that? Do you ever remember the shows that had the guy with the antenna? They put a collar on some kind of critter and they'd track him with the antenna, they'd find him. That's basically what we were trying to do here. We took some really tiny nano tags that were called. They were actually made for things like turtles and reptiles. We hollowed out a cockleburr, and to kind of disguise it, we put some rings on it that you see there. That's how we're gonna suspend them. And the way these things work is there's a magnet on them, and when that magnet is removed, they begin to transmit a signal that you can pick up using the antenna and a receiver. And our idea was to try to get one of these things to tag itself so we could track it. So that's what it looked like up close. That's what it looked like suspended. The top piece of black thread you see, that was suspended between two trees. One end would be tied firmly, the other end would be kind of just wrapped loosely around the tree. So as if something walked through it, that wrapped end would come unwrapped and just kind of flow out with the animals that walked by. But the cockleburr, which we also slathered a bunch of rat trap glue and stuff on it to make it extra sticky, we hope would adhere to the animal's fur. The bottom ring and string, that thread is connected to the magnet, and it's firmly tied to the tree, so that when something did walk off with it, it would pull that magnet off and the nanotag would begin transmitting. Okay, so that's kind of a diagram of the setup, how it looked. We set this thing, Tag 7 in particular was set up at a height of 7.5 feet. We wanted to eliminate the possibility of a bobcat or a bear or something like that meandering through and picking it up. That's what it looks like when it's suspended over a game trail. Now, if you've ever done much walking in the woods in the summer, I know what I do. I got a stick. You look like a lunatic going through the woods like this because all the spider webs in front of you. And so it just looks like forest debris hung up in a spider web. That's all it looks like. Now, long story short, in August of 2015, Tag 7 was activated. We went, I was not on site, but our guys went to look for it. It was gone. They turned the receiver on, started to scan, and they picked the signal up immediately. It was very strong, If you can see this bottom middle, that's a picture of the receiver. The more bars you get, the stronger the signal, the closer the tag is. So this thing was just going off the chart. It was so close. But it was also right at dark. And they've been having activity all week, so they thought, well, we'll just, we're not going to be any good tromping around the woods in the middle of the night. We'll pick it up first thing in the morning. Mistake. Came out in the morning, turned the receiver on, scanned, couldn't find the signal anywhere. The rest of the summer, we tried to pick up the signal, it was no good. These things have a battery life 10 months to a year, and it's just gone. And we didn't know it had malfunctioned, had whatever animal that had picked it up, picked it off, destroyed it, whatever, but it was gone. One of the members of the group at that time was a wildlife biologist from Maine. He suggested putting an antenna and a receiver up on a plane. Fortunately, we had 2 or 3 pilots in the group that agreed to do this. We rigged it up, and they flew a grid and figure 8 patterns and all kinds of stuff over the general area of the Ouachitas, and sure enough, we picked it up. They picked it up 2 valleys over from where it was deployed. They got a total over several months of about 25 confirmed hits. When they got the hit, they would record the GPS data from it. Now, we took that data, those hits, and we plugged them into the 3 most commonly accepted formulas to determine the home range of an animal. Now, 25 hits is considered on the low side of acceptable for figuring out home range of an animal, but it does fall within the acceptable range. So we used something called the minimum convex polygon method. It generated an estimate of a home range for this animal of 18.75 square miles based on the way the hits were spread out over those months that we tracked it. Another method called the adaptive kernel method, an even bigger estimate of 42.71 square miles. And the biggest one of all was called the ellipse method. We plugged it in, and it said this thing might have a home range of 71 miles. And we compared that. We kind of put all those, average them together. That's bigger than the home range of a black bear, which is commonly what most people figure, who doubt that it was a Sasquatch that picked it up. They said it was probably just a bear. We tracked this thing. We didn't pick up the signal again until December, January, February of late 2015 and early 2016. The bears are in torpor. They're hibernating at that time. This thing was all over the place. And we had ground teams trying to chase it. The planes would send the data, hey, it's over here. We had ground teams, we would get in that area, and according to the scanner and receiver they got within 100 meters of it on multiple occasions, but it always would retreat into the nastiest, most inhospitable, difficult areas where we just couldn't chase it effectively. But the home range was bigger than that of a bear based on published data. It does fall within the range of a mountain lion, but according to the Oklahoma Wildlife Department, they don't have any of those there in Oklahoma. Now, we know better, but even so, the tag was strung up 7.5 feet high. And we had done a lot of testing. A brilliant guy named Mark McClurkin had done a lot of testing on various pelts and hides and things. And short-haired coats like that of a mountain lion, a deer, the tags just did not adhere to very long. They would fall off. Some people have suggested other animals, which we're going to talk about. Black bear, it would have adhered to, but again, it's 7.5 feet high, and unlike grizzly bears, a black bear 7.5 feet, that would be the monster mother of all black bears right there. And if it did, it probably would have hit the tag with its pawing at it. And it probably would not have adhered to it very long. So I think that's unlikely. Mountain lions aren't supposed to be there at all anyway, and testing kind of showed that it would not have adhered to a mountain lion coat probably very long. We continued to track this thing for 10 months. Deer just doesn't fit the profile. Some people suggested an owl or a raptor of some kind. These things would not stick to feathers at all. Some people suggested a bat. possible, but bats hibernate at the same time bears do. They either fly south for the winter or they hibernate, and so the idea of it being a bat doesn't seem very practical either. And then you got coyotes get blamed for everything. If you don't notice that, they get blamed for everything, all kinds of weird noises. Raccoons, coyotes. It's 7.5 feet high, and it's on a thin thread. You say, well, a raccoon could have got out there and got it. It's possible, but it wouldn't have a home range of 70 miles either. So all things together, it doesn't fit the profile of any of the known wildlife in the Ouachitas. So a whole paper was done, it's just called the Tag 7 paper. It's still on the NAWAC website. Anybody can access it and read it. We submitted it for publication, and along with our hypothesis that this was a wood ape or a Sasquatch that picked this tag up, it was dismissed because there's no such thing as the Sasquatch, therefore it cannot be that. There's no evidence that the Sasquatch exists. We said, well, we think this is evidence. Well, your evidence cannot be valid because there's no such thing as a Sasquatch, so you just go in this circle with these guys, right? So it was never officially published in any kind of journal or anything, but it's on the website now. Basically, that's everything I told you. It just doesn't fit the profile of anything. Either the estimated home range was too large, it's the wrong time of year, it was too high, it just didn't fit the profile of known animals. Now, also in the book, we talk about the need to collect a type specimen. If this thing is ever going to be proven real, as DW said earlier, science is going to want a body. It's kind of the ugly part of science. Every known animal got into the science books because somebody put one on a slab. That's just the way it is. Now, the NAWC had been attempting to collect one of these things for almost 20 years now. It's kind of the ugly part of things. The way I ask people to think of it, there's a whole chapter about why I believe this is needed, why it's necessary. You know, people are like, why don't you just leave them alone? They're not hurting anybody, and that's true, but habitat continues to disappear. I don't think hunters are a threat to these things. If they were, we'd have dozens of them in taxidermy shops all over the world by now. It's habitat destruction that's going to stop them. We have to prove they're real so that we can get the habitat set aside and protected. If you ask the government to set aside land in the Ouachitas as a Sasquatch sanctuary right now, you might as well be asking them to set up a unicorn sanctuary because they're not real, right? So the only thing, and as you also saw with DW's presentation, I was really glad to see what he was doing. Because of AI, because of, before that, Photoshop, is any photo ever going to be enough? There will always be doubt. There will always be doubt. If the Patterson-Gimlin footage from 1967, broad daylight, there it goes, there's 30 seconds or whatever it is of it just walking away, and contrary to popular belief, it has never been successfully debunked. If that's not enough video evidence, in this time of AI, what will be? People say, well, DNA evidence. Here's how DNA works. This is an oversimplification, but they've got all the animals in the world cataloged with their DNA in a database, in a data bank, genome bank. When you submit something for testing, it doesn't match anything in the known world, it comes back as unknown, or it's tainted. It's tainted. And you're not going to get anybody who does DNA to say, oh, that's a Sasquatch, that's a Bigfoot. Unless there's something to compare it to that it matches. And guess where those animals that are on file, guess where they got their DNA from? They got it from a specimen. Science must be repeatable. Somebody must be able to come to that animal, that specimen, run their own test, reach the same conclusions, get the same results as scientist A, B, C, and D before them. That's how you get things into the science books. Try to think of it as one and one only, to save the whole species. Think in terms of the population, not as an individual. It's a very emotionally charged issue for a lot of people. But I would argue with anybody that says, you guys are just hateful, murdering, you just want to take one and put it on your mantle. No, that's the only way it's going to happen. And we hope one day, I was talking to a gentleman over here, I hope one day to walk through the woods and find one that was 90 years old, died of a heart attack of old age after a great life. That's probably not going to happen. So that's what that's about. Now, having said that, I have kind of done a pivot. I was a big supporter of collection for years. I've changed my mind. Maybe not for the same reasons other people are against it. In our little area where we've worked for almost 20 years, civilization has steadily come a little closer and closer. We go in there, spend 3 months, and never see another outsider. The last few years, we can't go a day without an ATV rider coming through. Joyriders, we're seeing people. I no longer believe that it's safe to attempt collection in that area anymore. So I think that window is shut, at least in that area. I still think that's going to be what's needed.
That's what's going to happen, but I just don't think.
Okay, good. I still think the specimen is going to be what's needed to prove it absolutely 100% once and for all. But I've done a little research, and the liability issues behind attempting such a thing are staggering. And I would advise any citizen scientist, someone not affiliated with the government or a huge research institution, we need to collect as much evidence as we can of other forms, try to make a compelling case so that somebody else can do it, because you're putting yourself at tremendous risk, I believe, to go out and try to do this on your own, both personally, the chance of some kind of terrible, tragic accident occurring, and then just financial liability. If something bad happens, people are going to come after you, and it's not worth losing everything you have over it. So I've kind of done a pivot away from active attempts to get a collection ourselves, but I still think that is ultimately what it's going to take. Now, if you'd like to hear some more stuff about my activities, what we do, these are the links for you. I write a blog called the Texas Cryptid Hunter blog. There's an address there. My author site is second. And then I'm on Twitter as well, and Facebook. And then if you're the NAWAC's website address is woodape.org. And in the book, there's a lot of really great stories. Scary, funny. We had a Boggy Creek incident story in there where one of these things reached through a screen window and grabbed onto the hip of one of the guys that was laying asleep in the room. It's worth the price for that story alone. So anyway, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, Robert has put me in the corner over there where I belong, so feel free to swing by. Thank you very much.